Good evening, everyone. My name is Audrey Wood, and as the president-elect of BPW St. Petersburg-Pinellas, I welcome you to our Working Women's Forum. Our title this year is Working to Belong, Creating Environments Where Everyone Thrives. We are also thankful for our host, the Center for Health Equity, and we trust that you will find this program engaging, informative, and will provide you with thoughtful dialogue that can help us all create environments where everyone thrives. So thank you for being here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Cummins. I'm the co-chair of the committee that planned this event. So when we get together once a year, we have a panel discussion to talk about issues that women face in the workplace. And BPW's mission is to achieve equity for all working women through advocacy, education, and connections. And one of the things that makes BPW different than other women's groups is that we have a public policy platform that's our blueprint for advocacy work in respect, justice, and equality for working women. We believe that all women should have the opportunity to be well-educated, healthy, economically strong, secure, and their families should be able to live and work in communities that foster those ideals. I want to thank our sponsors. Our diversity level sponsor is Duke Energy. Our equity level sponsors are Alabella Interiors, Let Amy Handle It, and Wolf Accounting Solutions. Our belonging sponsors are Sheila Berry Oliver, Helen Igar, the Bill Edwards Foundation for the Arts, Therapeutic Massage Center, Amplify Health Advisors, Gold Star Mortgage Financial Group, the Sims team at Coastal Properties, Christie's International Real Estate, Brandy Image Photography, and Perfect Copy and Print. We also want to thank our partner in this event, the St. Petersburg Area Chamber of Commerce. And at this time, I want to introduce the Executive Director of the Center for Health Equity, Marcus Brooks.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Truly grateful to have you all in this space. I'm guessing this is probably not the first time you've been here for some of you. If it is the first time, can you please raise your hands? Amazing. So everything I say will not be a broken record. But it's customary here at the Center for Health Equity that we do acknowledge and lift up the original custodians of the land that we share here in Pinellas County, the Miccosukee, Tocobaga, and Seminole tribes. We don't just do that for the fun of it. We truly understand that in many cases we are stolen people on stolen land, and so it's important to acknowledge that before we get into anything that we do here at the Center for Health Equity. As stated, I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Foundation for Healthy St. Petersburg Center for Health Equity. The foundation is a phenomenal organization to work for and work with, but we are nothing without our community partners and the folks that put together amazing experiences like this tonight. Specifically, I just want to quickly speak to belonging, because this is a former segregated grocery store, and in many cases, people did not belong in this building. We don't initially acknowledge the original grocery store, because I would also say that that same organization went on to be one of the first advertisers of the Weekly Challenger as soon as it was integrated. And so that's a perfect example of doing the work post living in a society that was not for everyone. So as our organization looks to advance racial equity in an effort to improve the overall health of our community, to eliminate disparities, we work to navigate through this challenging social climate, a climate that makes us all ask ourselves, what are the spaces that we are creating? It's not enough to have people at the table. It's not enough to have people's voices in the room. If the space is not actually designed for them to feel like this is my culture, this is my space, this is my building, these are my people, then we've done ourselves a disservice. And so I'm truly grateful and honored to be a part of a conversation on belonging, because it is the one, I think, that oftentimes gets left out of the conversation. So thank you all for that. Bring yourselves into this community, bring yourselves into this conversation. I am so grateful that our community, that our humanities have aligned tonight, and anything that you all need, find our team and we'll make sure to support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. At your tables, you'll find some note cards and pens. If you think of questions you'd like to ask the panel during tonight's presentation, go ahead and fill those out. I'll be circling around, picking them up. If you have a question, just hold it up and I'll come get it and make sure it gets up to the panel. Unfortunately, Lanisa Manuel, who was scheduled to be our moderator, could not make it tonight because she had a family emergency. So instead, of course, we're moving on. So we want to thank Delquanda Turner-Smith for stepping up and taking on the role from moving from panelist to moderator. And I could spend probably the entire time talking about all of our speakers, but I really want to just get right into the heart of why we're here. So our speakers tonight are Jeff Baker from Duke Energy, Kimberly Rogers, the Executive Director at the Community Law Program, Jessica Tomlinson, the President of the Democratic Disability Caucus, Pinellas Chapter, and our new moderator, Delquanda Turner-Smith. If you guys could come on up.
Testing.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. Like they've shared, our bios are in your program, so we are not going to spend much time saying who we are and what we do, because we want to get down to the work and the sense of belonging, right? And we want to be able to hear from you as well. So like they shared before, there are cards on your tables as we are speaking, and if you have any questions now, feel free to fill out those cards, because we do want to hear from you and be able to answer any questions that you all have. So I'm going to start with our great panel here, and I'll be interjecting throughout as well. Just to, and feel free as you are introducing or starting to answer the question, just to say hello to the group. But I'm going to start our first question is, how important is intentional equity to your workplace or to your clients or customers? How intentional is equity to your workplace and or to your clients and customers? So as you all are thinking about that, I'll give a segue into that, because at Inclusivity LLC, we believe that equity is intentional. It requires more. And so in order to do that, we have to have an understanding of what our culture needs, what our community needs, what the demographics are, and how to be able to engage thoroughly in that. So I will start with, who would like to start with that question? How important is intentional equity?
I'll start. Hello, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I think intentional equity is very important in the workplace, because it makes everyone feel comfortable. I am a person that, when you look at me, you see my race. I am a Black woman, but I am also, I have a physical disability. I'm legally blind, and that is something that is, because of those three barriers that I have faced in my life, I think that it is important for a workplace, because you spend, so much of your time in the course of a day working, that you feel comfortable in that space. And so I like to do things that would make people feel comfortable. I like to, and I mean, my job is at Community Law Program, which provides free legal services. And many of the clients that we serve have disadvantages because of their race or because of other um, um, conditions that they have. And I want to make sure that we acknowledge those challenges and bring um, design opportunities and resources that are going to reach those individuals in a way that is equitable and allows them to obtain the same opportunities. And then as it relates to the community that we serve, I think it's important that the low-income residents that we serve feel like they are coming to a place where they can be themselves and they can feel comfortable. And so we want a workplace that's going to reflect that.
Okay, take two. Thank you, Kimberly. So, as our moderator said, I am the president of the Democratic Disability Caucus, but I also, my day job, I teach at Lighthouse of Pinellas. I teach technology, I teach independent living skills, and that is probably more so where intentional equity comes in trying to, like you said, Kimberly, trying to make people feel like they can be themselves, like they won't be judged. And I think a way to achieve that is to do some research to find out about different populations with different identities and historical marginalizations, and then to ask those people what would improve this environment, what would make you feel more at home, what should we know about, what should we look out for. And I think that research and conversation ahead of time before something is designed can go a long way rather than trying to throw it in as an afterthought. So apps and websites, for instance, need to be accessible to screen readers and screen magnification and high contrast for people that need high contrast. And I've seen so many apps and websites try to throw on a Band-Aid solution rather than conversing with people ahead of time for all kinds of accessibility needs, having them try it and give feedback before development is 95% done. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Jeff Baker from Duke Energy. From my perspective, to be successful in any DEIB realm, you have to be intentional. One of the examples that I feel like where we have taken a major step forward locally is, our goal, let's face it, we serve the entire community. Our workforce should look like our entire community, and quite frankly, it hasn't in the past. One of the things that we did probably 6, 7, 8 years ago now is in our line tech position, that position in particular did not mirror the community that we served. We have a statewide training facility in the Winter Garden area that does an exceptional job, but again, we weren't getting the right candidates to mirror our community. So we partnered with the Urban League, again, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, for the Urban League to help us specifically with recruiting. And they were doing a great job for us, and we were certainly seeing advances in our minority hiring. But again, we weren't quite where we needed to be. So it's probably been 4 years ago now, we started having conversations with St. Pete College, Dr. Tanja Williams, about our goal to increase minority presence within our workforce. And so now what we have done, we have a great partnership between Urban League, St. Pete College, us, and several other organizations where we're only in St. All of our lineman hiring in the rest of the state is done through traditional, like I said, everyone starts their training in Winter Garden, Florida. But we have a program with St. Pete College, literally just down the street, where they are training, interested individuals in line work here. And the good thing about that is, again, Urban League is still very active in the recruitment portion of that. But if you hire local and you train local, most of these individuals are going to stay local. And for an organization like us, that is a union position, so it doesn't make any difference if you live in St. Petersburg, Florida, DeLand, Florida, Crawfordville, Florida, it pays the exact same. I think you can all agree that the economy in St. Petersburg, I joke that we pay New York rents, but we make St. Pete wages. So what we were seeing was a lot of people, again, we weren't having a problem hiring per se, we were having a problem retaining individuals, because they would start here and then they would realize, hey, I can move to Crawfordville, Florida for a whole lot less money, and they would transfer to those positions. So our St. Pete Operations Center became more or less like a training center for the rest of the state. But now that we're hiring local, these individuals already have a home here. It has, it's changing the trajectory of our workforce. And again, that was all done very intentionally to ensure that we move forward in ensuring that our workforce looks like the customers that we serve.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. So there you have it about intentional equity. What does that look like and mean, and the importance in the workplace to your clients and community? And just a quick shout out to the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg and here at the Center for Health Equity. When we talk about intentional equity, that's why we're here, right? That is why we're here, because of their mission to deploy intentional equity in everything that we do for our community. So as we transition to the next question, I just want to say too that in 2022, last year, Inclusivity held one of its annual conferences, Thriving in the House Divided, How to Navigate in a Polarized Society. So that's why I really appreciate the title today. What we learned was that we do need to have conversations. We do need to understand how and why people as individuals and organizations and systems navigate the way they do. And we kicked off that sense of belonging. We talked about belonging in addition to our cultural competency, our culture, and our DEI. Instead of just talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, we know that there is a sense of belonging. So the question I do want to pose to the panel is, what is your quickest answer? What does a sense of belonging mean to you as an individual, as a person? Go for it, Jessica. I see you grabbing that mic.
Hey, I even know how to turn it on now. Okay, so a sense of belonging means more than making physical accommodations in the space. So when we talk about the disability community, the very first thing that comes to a lot of people's minds is curb cuts and ramps and elevators. And those are great. Those were hard-won accommodations from the ADA, which took a very long time to get passed compared to other landmark legislation. However, true belonging goes beyond that. True belonging means that people with their opinions, beliefs, and attitudes are open to learning, are willing to see that every individual has talent and opinions and contributions that are worthwhile. And they say that you can't legislate attitudes, which makes it particularly challenging. However, when someone has a friend with a disability, wants to go for dinner or go to a movie or go someplace, cares about whether that space that they want to go is accessible so they can invite their friend. maybe takes the time to learn about someone's culture so that they don't say or do something that is maybe inappropriate or can give them a card for their holiday for their culture rather than just saying a lot of nice things but then being too uncomfortable to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
From my perspective, just a simple answer would be, it is a place where you are welcomed, but it's also a place where you feel like you belong. Because it's one of those things where just because the door is open to you does not necessarily mean you're going to be comfortable going through that door. And I think that's where, again, intentionality is really important to make those that are invited in feel comfortable.
I would agree with everything that's been said. I also would think that belonging also means feeling comfortable, expressing one's opinions, even though they may be different than others, and not feeling like you're going to be penalized or judged because you have a contrary opinion, but that your opinion will be valued and respected. And I think that in the workplace, we we have achieved that at community law program, because we started something simple as a book club. We meet about once a month after work and discuss a book, and we've always intentionally tried to choose a book that might be a bit controversial, for lack of a better word, or informative. How about that? Informative about differences. And we have discussions about those, candid discussions. And I believe that, and I would love to ask my employees what they think about this, but I think that they feel that they can discuss their differences of opinions about certain topics in a way that is not going to be viewed negatively or harshly. So that's what belonging is.
Thank you all so much. And Kimberly, if I can share one of the first interactions we had many years ago at was it at the James? It was at a Foundation for Healthy St. Petersburg event, and you brought to my attention that, hey, I'm visually impaired. And so I remember taking that information back to the office just to be more mindful about, as we are having events, what are we asking of everyone? And since then, I've learned about various, you brought it to our attention about you being visually impaired and wanting to say something, but again, not wanting to be penalized in a sense because you were able to share your opinion. So, but you very so eloquently did. Since then, we've been very mindful of even certain dietary restrictions. Where's my friend, Dr. Sharon around here somewhere, who always made it known what no eggs, no cheese, no. I think I still have it down, Dr. Sharon, but that's important because we need to know. I mean, we all have our differences and we all want to feel a sense of belonging. You don't want to come into a space where there's food and you can't eat any of it. So that's just a little thing. So thank you all for bringing and sharing your perspectives on a sense of belonging. So I do have a few more questions and I want to be mindful of, I know we're doing okay on time, but for the next few questions, I'm just going to throw it out and ask one of you to answer unless you all feel moved to answer. It's just so I can get to a few of the questions before our open Q&A. So I'll start with Kimberly, if you don't mind. Could you share a memory from your early career dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging that may have impacted your current leadership style? A memory from your early career that may have impacted your current leadership style. I know you've mentioned there's a book club now to be more informative. Tell me about Kimberly in her early career.
I in my early career, impacting my leadership style. Oh my gosh. Um, well, I, okay, can it be something in
Whatever you want.
school?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so I I think I remember when I was in 12th grade, um, my school was giving awards for, the best student in various academic disciplines. And they had an award for math and science and social studies and language arts. And um, I received the award for I'm sorry, for science, because I did a lot of chemistry and biology and stuff. Um, and in those other three areas, they gave one award for the top person. Um, but in the science award, because I was the recipient and I was black, they also gave a second award to a white student. Um, and that student, her father was a science teacher at the school. My grades were higher, but her father was a science teacher. So um, I think that as a result of that experience, I think that reinforced what my father always taught me, which was, to 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 exceed and do well um, academically and in a career, because of your specific disadvantages, mine being my race, my disability. I'm going to have to work harder, twice as hard, twice as long, for equal credit. And I think that as a leader, I have instilled that principle, that experience drives me, even to this day, to like commit and do 120% of whatever it is that I try to achieve. And I try to encourage my employees that I um, uh, work with, supervise, to also strive to be the best that they can be, with, given whatever limitations they may have. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Jeff, what policies or strategies have you or your organization deployed to promote diversity in the workplace?
Actually, I think we have a lot of different policies and procedures. And again, this isn't, something that's new to us. I mean, it's one of those things where I can still remember, I joined the company in 2006, and, I very specifically remember attending, it was a class that we called Race Awareness in 2008. So we've always been on the journey to improve in the area. But as things have happened over the years, and we've certainly embraced the employee resource groups, we have an employee networking group, whatever you want to call them, for pretty much everything that you can think of, from LGBTQ to those with disabilities. We have our newest one is for Native Americans. So we have quite a few where we give opportunities, for our employees, and anyone can be a member of any organization. You do not have to be whatever that group is representing. But I would also say that 2023 was, or has been, a very challenging year for many organizations in the DEI space. So we've had to really take a look at our policies and procedures and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to uphold the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our organization, when there have been times, I'm trying not to get political here, but we are regulated by the Florida Public Service Commission. We had to make sure that we were abiding by all the laws, rules, ordinances, et cetera, placed upon us, but also making sure that our employees knew that they were still valued and they were still welcomed as the person they are, because we want all of our individuals to bring their whole self to work, not just a compartmentalized version of themselves.
Thank you so much. We know too that as a result of George Floyd, a lot of organizations have deployed DEI strategies, groups looked at their policies. There was a lot going on around there as well. So thank you so much for sharing. Jessica, ready for your question? Have any of the legislative mandates impacted your ability to provide services or carry out any policies within your organization?
I believe I'm fairly fortunate in this regard because I work for a nonprofit organization that is a non-government organization. We do receive half of our funding from the Florida State Division of Blind Services. However, with that very small department of the state, we have had no issues in terms of diversity and inclusion. However, I do realize that I am in a very privileged position and may not recognize all of the ramifications that may be in effect at all levels. However, at least in my workplace, it has not prevented us from having discussions and shining a light on many diverse types of people from many walks of life. I will say that in my political advocacy sphere as the president of the Democratic Disability Caucus, our whole goal and our whole mission is to advocate for the inclusion of all types of people in the political process and to encourage people to vote, to make the polls accessible, to do away with some of these new things that are impacting organizations' ability to implement DEI, especially if they are government organizations.
Thank you. Would Jeff or Kimberly like to respond to that question? Any legislative mandates impacted your abilities to provide services?
I will say we have, there have been certain state regulations, and we do business in quite a few states, and some of the legislations that have been passed in various states that prohibits abortion, birth control, et cetera, we have developed policies to where our employees have the ability to access the needed services through our company's health plans and things of that nature.
Thank you. Next question for anyone. In what ways can we measure the success of diversity and inclusion initiatives? Are there any key performance indicators that you are aware of or recommend? So in what ways can we measure the success of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Are there any key performance indicators that you are aware of or recommend? Anyone?
As a large corporation, we actually do surveys of our employees to determine where our employees feel that we are on these initiatives, and it's one of those things where we take those comments very seriously. And one thing that might surprise some of the audience is we are basically a minority-ran company at Duke. Our CEO is a woman. She's been the CEO for 10 and a half years. Our current Florida state president and our last state president were both women. At one point in time, 4 of our 7 state presidents were women. So I always joke that I have nothing but women above me in my organization. So, and I do think that when you have women in leadership, because many of them have faced career challenges that some of the men may not have experienced through their careers. I think that they choose, and there goes back that intentionality to make sure that, you know, we are addressing these issues. So.
That's why Jeff is on the panel. Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else? Measure success. Kimberly, were you gonna add anything?
Well, I don't know if this is a formal measurement, but I know that from a legal standpoint, a lot of what the work that we do relates to helping tenants who are facing eviction. And although there are no formal, or were no formal statistics on the number of persons of color that were facing eviction, there's a lot of data on the correlation between income and race, and the lack of income, and the where you live, and the rate at which you may be facing evictions. And prior to the pandemic, we were experiencing a lot of we were helping a lot of tenants, but the tenants that we were helping were primarily non-black, and landlord-tenant law is such in Florida that it's really hard to for a tenant to basically get a level playing field unless they have money or access to representation. And we wanted to increase the number of persons of color that were receiving the resources that we were providing. And so what we did was after the pandemic, we partnered with a street outreach team that went door to door in areas of St. Petersburg that had a high minority population, and delivered flyers about our services. And they were, trusted members in the community that other folks would trust and recognize. And as a result of those efforts, we were able to increase the number of persons of color that we assisted that were facing eviction. It had gone from 10% to 40%, so
Great.
significant.
No, that was good. That was both great responses to the question. And what I also heard was leading with the data. As the Senior Advisor of Equity at the Pinellas Education Foundation, that is exactly what we did. We led with the data to understand what are the students in Pinellas County, how are they performing, how are our internal practices being measured, what are they, what is the board makeup and composition. It's important to lead with the data. You have to understand, you have to know who you have in the room, understand the demographics of who you're trying to serve in order to get the outcomes that you want. Again, we hear all the time that we can't keep doing the same thing the same way. We have to do something different. If we want to be innovative, then first of all, pause and understand who is in the room. Who are you trying to reach? Who are you trying to serve? And like Kimberly was explaining, those measurements along the way, those KPIs, where are we going? What are we doing? What's the ultimate goal that we want to have in order to get to where we want to be and make the income that we need to see in our community? Thank you. So this question, again, is going to be for anyone. How can we as citizens advocate for policies that promote healthy workplaces? How can we as citizens advocate for policies that promote healthy workplaces? Jessica?
There are many ways that folks can advocate for healthy workplaces. And this may sound elementary, but I believe it starts with voting in your local elections. Everybody pays attention when there's a presidential race or a governor's race or even a mayor's race. But the things that I believe we need to pay more attention to are the city council, the school board, the county commission, the local judges. There is a great guide. I believe the address is vote411.com. It's put out by the League of Women Voters that will tell you an impartial, nonpartisan rundown of everything that is on your ballot. They ask questions of candidates and literally reprint word for word what each candidate said. And for the judges, there are links to bios and information about them. So that is one way, using your voice to vote. Another way is to contact your officials, to hold your city council, your county commission accountable, and also our friendly, lovely state legislature. We need to be writing to them, telling our stories. Not everyone should be expected to tell their story all the time. Educating does become a, I don't want to say a burdensome, because usually I love to educate, but it can be a thing that is a lot of work if one has to do it day in and day out. But certainly if a person is able to that day, or has the bandwidth, or believes that they are not in danger or going to face too much backlash, sharing your story both with your elected officials, with your community, with your friends, in the media, that is a great way to begin to advocate for policies that promote change.
Thank you. And I truly believe there is always someone out there that is willing to share your story. If you are not comfortable sharing your own, contact a friend of a friend or the League of Women Voters who could possibly help share that story, because at times where you may not feel as comfortable or may not be in a place to do so, let your voice be heard in various ways. Thank you. Our next question is, what steps can be taken to ensure that diverse perspectives and voices are valued and heard in decision-making processes at the highest organizational level or across the organization? What steps can be taken to ensure that diverse perspectives and voices are valued and heard when it comes to decision-making? I know we talked about data, we've talked about employee relations groups, we talked about, various programs. What steps can be taken to ensure that those perspectives and voices are valued?
Well, I think the most important thing is get out amongst the people that you serve, whether that be, in a community role, as an employer. You really have to know your employees' needs, wants, and desires in order to be ensuring that you're able to meet those. The one other thing that you mentioned about, now this not necessarily from a work perspective, but also question everything that you read, from what is the intent of this publication, author, whatever, because it's, unfortunately in our world, and the way social media, I don't want to, I feel like, you are fed exactly what the cyber world wants you to be fed. So I have seen so many people lose objectivity. I've seen intelligent people, spout off things to me that I could fact check within 30 seconds to determine that it's not true, but they come to you with this belief that if it's on the internet, it has to be true. And I would say if it's on the internet, it's probably not true. So I think that, you have to have a much more questioning attitude today in order to be successful in the DEI arena, because you have to know that much of what you are hearing is not correct, but you also have to have that questioning attitude to get those that you serve comfortable sharing with what their needs are.
Thank you so much. At Inclusivity LLC, we perform services such as a cultural competence assessment. And it's very important to hear from all persons within an organization to get an understanding of their experience, right? Their experience where they are. So usually what we do with our clients is we encourage them, don't take the data personal. Don't take what they're saying personal. It's their experience, right? Their experience is much more important, because otherwise, why would we be doing this survey? Why would we want to know someone's perspectives and experiences? We want to know it to make an organization better, to understand the culture. So that's a very important thing too when it comes to decision making. Understanding what's in front of you, understanding the culture, understanding the perspectives and voices, especially in a way that, in a manner too, that doesn't feel as though there will be retaliation afterwards, because you want staff and all employees to bring their best selves, their best perspectives, their honest experiences, to be able to share that without feeling as though something is going to happen, because they do. But we want to know, we want to understand that, because it's important for decisions to be based off of the whole of organizations and companies. Thank you so much for sharing. Remember, if you have any additional questions, make sure you're writing them down on the cards in front of you. So our next question is, so we talked about, someone started talking about, I think you did, technology a little bit, but in what ways can technology and data be harnessed to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? How can we use technology? How can we flip it around and use it for our good? Go for it, Jessica.
Lately, I've been hearing a lot of talk about robots and AI. They're coming for us! That's a joke, but I have also heard, in all seriousness, that there is bias built into AI and robots. So, did anyone stop to wonder why the default voice on Siri and Alexa is female? Because the programmers wanted a subservient secretary answering all their questions and fulfilling all their needs. Now, yes, it can be changed, but that's just an example of, if we look at some of these automated resume receptor systems that look for certain keywords and key phrases, yes, people can be taught to implement those keywords and key phrases. But what about people with English as a second language? What about people whose cultural experiences cause them to use different words and different phrases to indicate similar ideas? That cuts them right out of the process. So how we fix that is we need to keep advocating. And big tech seems like an impossible giant. But I do believe the more we talk about reducing the bias inherent in AI and automated systems, and the more we advocate for making systems more equitable, we can also make various groups aware of that bias inherent in those systems, but we don't necessarily want to expect various groups to assimilate and talk like, act like, write like the systems are expecting. Yes, that can be a temporary Band-Aid solution, but the real solution is to not let big tech get away with cutting people out. I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, that's great. Thank you. Very much appreciate it. Would anyone else like to share? Can technology be used for the good of diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging? If not, we'll move on. Okay.
I'm having trouble under finding the good in technology to foster DEI. So I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
That's real. And thank you for sharing that. You know what? That's real. Keeping it personal, local, and immediate, right? Keep it real. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to read one last question, and then we're going to get to some questions. Let me just do a quick time check. I think we have quite a few questions from our audience, so I'm going to put these down and transition to some of those questions from our audience to ensure that we're able to get through them all. So thank you so much. Kimberly, I'm going to start with you because it has your name on it. What has been put in place in the judicial system to monitor and address biases from judges? Joy.
I think that's probably a question for our new circuit judge, circuit chief judge. But I think that there is some training that goes on that probably should be more training to enable judges to recognize that bias certainly does not go away because they are judges, but they need to understand how to recognize bias and how to set it aside when they're ruling. And I think there's training that's being offered to address that. I'm not sure that they are all taking advantage of that training.
Thank you. Next question is, can you identify an important issue like transportation that might create a barrier to inclusion in your workplace? Ooh, get it, Jessica. Go for it.
So, transportation in Pinellas County has gotten somewhat better in the last 5 years. PSTA Access is the paratransit door-to-door equivalent for folks that, because of their disability, have a difficult time using the fixed route bus. We also have a very new program specific to St. Petersburg where a grant was provided so that more people are able to access the TD or reduced fare program due to economic situations. So that's all very good. And especially with PSTA access, we have a on-demand service now called Mobility on Demand, where we can either call a call center or use an app to book a Uber or Lyft ride for a bus fare anytime between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. That's wonderful. But as I said before, I have privilege. I have white privilege. I can walk privilege. I'm not a wheelchair user. I understand for some of my friends that do use wheelchairs, the average Uber and Lyft driver is just not prepared to accommodate them. So they have another contract with another company that has far fewer drivers. They need to wait much, much longer than we do. They deal with a lot more difficulty, not only getting into spaces that are not accessible, like restaurants that have very narrow walkways in between the tables, places where there are steps, but have to, with the transportation of the Mobility on Demand, the company that serves them, there are not as many drivers and they need to wait much longer, sometimes in unsafe areas. So it's great for some of us, but it needs improvement so that it can serve all of us.
Thank you so much for that. I know, too, there are multiple studies being done with PSTA and other organizations. So when I start calling you and tapping on your doors to get your opinions a little bit more, get your perspectives in order to better inform, right, with all the studies, we know the issues. It's been happening, especially around transportation for years, but how can we better increase and enhance what PSTA and the transportation sector is trying to do and trying to support the community. So I'll be knocking on some of your doors too with some additional information around transportation. So the next question has my name on it. It says, can individuals access your cultural competence perspective survey for self-improvements Could it work that way? Yes, just not yet. I'm not going to say no. Eric, you hear me back there? Eric is the managing member of my husband, so I'm not saying no, but it is something that we would like to look into. That's a great question, so please call me after or see me afterward, because I would love to learn more around what more you're thinking. But I do have some, when I read this too, I'm like, ooh, that's a great suggestion. Got some ideas in mind already, so thank you so much for that. The next question is, does belonging always denote thriving? What inspires the transition to thriving? Does belonging always denote thriving? What inspires the transition to thriving? Who would like to take that on?
I think belonging is required to thrive. It's one of those things where, you know, there are some that are comfortable in their situation and everything, and may not, you know, depending on what your definition of thriving is, they may not necessarily want to be in a different space than what they are. But if you want to thrive, you have to feel a sense of belonging to a group organization. So belonging is critical to career success and things of that nature.
Thank you. And I know too, I hear a lot of keywords, buzzwords: thriving, sustaining, like scaling. When do we want to scale, right? Yeah, we want to thrive, we want to sustain. I think thriving, I would say, may be at the end of that continuum, because we need to scale in order to ensure that everyone has what they need, and then be able to thrive, move with it, go with it, help others along the way. So thank you all so much for that question. Do organizational core values amplify belonging? Do organizational core values amplify belonging? I'll start and speak on behalf of the Pinellas Education Foundation. Like I mentioned, I serve as a senior advisor of equity there. Belonging is not in one of the core values, although equity is. However, that is something that we do speak about, because it's one thing to have diversity, it's another thing to keep it. What is that sense of inclusion? What is that sense of belonging? You can have diversity all day long, but if someone who's coming to the table, to the staff, to the board, does not feel included, like they belong, so it's not on the person who's coming, it's on the committee or the group in order to keep them there, right? So equity and diversity training is not a one-man show or one-person show. It's about, for me, it's about changing hearts and minds. And we cannot do that alone. We cannot do that in one area of diversity. For example, in race, Black people can't do it by ourselves. We need all allies, advocates, voices, perspectives to carry the voice, to carry the message. The Urban League and NAACP was not just built alone. It was built because of the collaboration and the people who wanted to see change. So I think we need to take that motto and mindset and move that forward, even within organizations, to have a better and stronger and thriving community. So I'll get back to the question. Does anyone want to share about amplifying belonging in their organization's core value? Does anyone have belonging in their values within their organization or groups, or know someone that does? There you have it. That's something that may be needed. Yeah, exactly. Kimberly just said that's something that may need to be worked on, right? We talk about understanding DEI a whole lot. So what is that sense of belonging? So thank you all so much for that question, and it has more work. There's more work to be done. Retention is one workplace signal to indicate the health of belonging. What are organizational signals you look at to inform belonging initiatives? Retention. Retention is one workplace signal to indicate the health of belonging. What are organizational signals you look for to inform belonging initiatives? Do you know your retention rates, first of all? Okay, that's the first step, right? Do you understand the data? What are your retention rates? Do you know and understand why people are coming and going? Do you have exit interviews? Go.
I mean, we do exit interviews, but one thing at Duke now, we are actually very blessed that from a retention standpoint, we probably exceed 95% of of other organizations. I mean, our retention rate, depending on position, ranges from a couple of years to we have certain large groups of employees that have retention rates as high as 24 years. So, I mean, I work with a number of people that have been with our organization 35 plus years. So, but again, just because you have retention doesn't let you off the hook. You have got to look at, you want people to stay, but you want people to want to stay. And I think that's where, being intentional about your decisions only helps to benefit the organization.
Thank you. Kimberly, did you want to add?
Well, I think that, sometimes retention is certainly important, but I think for the Generation Z folks in the room, longevity on a job is not that important, or it seems to be sometimes to the younger generation. I think they look at, an employer's flexibility in terms of, work schedules, allowing remote work, creating opportunities for professional development and job cross-training and sharing, willingness to, work together collaboratively with employees. So.
Absolutely, all signals, all signals. Jessica?
I think that work-life balance is a very good indicator that runs alongside of retention. And work-life balance may be something that's very hard to quantify other than asking people directly, do you feel like you get enough sleep? Do you feel like you have a good work-life balance? And I think that that is also something that can mean different things to different people. However, if there is a general feeling that most employees have a good sense of work-life balance, in other words, if most employees are able to leave work at work most of the time, of course, if they're working remotely, that might be different, but after work hours, if they're able to rest, relax, take care of their mental health. For a lot of companies, I am noticing the growth of the gig economy, which is good for people that need flexible schedules, but is also a little bit scary because fewer and fewer people seem to have good benefits. I do believe that this probably goes without saying, but having good health insurance, having a good paid time off or sick leave policy goes a long way toward fostering that work-life balance. And I am very fortunate to be in a situation where I have all of that, but I'm becoming increasingly alarmed and uncomfortable that more and more places are offering less of that.
One thing to that point, when we talk about the gig economy doesn't have to be our definition of the gig economy. And what I mean by that is even if you're in a large corporation, we actually have it's a gig board to where we post, like as a manager, if I want an employee to come do something for 4 to 6 weeks or something, I can post that, and our employees throughout our system can, they have to obviously work with their manager to make sure it's comfortable, but we have allowed the gig economy, if you will, to come into, or I should say gig assignments to come into our workplace. And you're talking about that Gen Z who likes the variety and difference and everything. It's not used as prevalent as we expected it to be, but it's certainly an opportunity. And I feel like, large organizations that, want to retain talent have got to think creatively to meet the new demands of the workforce.
Thank you. We've heard several great signals, right? And I feel too, along with retention, if you are, in a sense, leading employees, training employees to be the best they can, it's okay when they go off and lead on their own because they are contributing to our economy. They're contributing to a better community, especially when they're staying in the community. But I feel that that's a great thing. And then Jessica said, ooh, work-life balance. I'm like, ooh, there goes that word again, work-life balance, right? What does that mean? We learned a lot during COVID, during the pandemic, about work-life balance and what it really means to us. I know it meant a lot for me, and a lot of things change. And I'm really harnessing my time and my work-life balance. So I did just want to do a quick survey on retention, if you don't mind participating. By the show of hands, how many of you have been at your organization or agency or business for more than 20 years? Nice. Thank you. What about between, let's see here, 10 to 19 years? Nice. Up to how many of you between 5 and 9 years? Okay. Between 1 and 4 years. Okay. For a year or less. Okay. Okay, so we have a variety, right? We have a variety. Have you all mostly stayed in the county, in the area, or have you come or gone in other areas? Okay, I see some head nods. Maybe, maybe not. Nope, nope. Variety are coming and going in our area. So retention, when we talk about retention too, you've heard all those signals, and I'm sure if we had another poll, everyone would bring their perspectives as to why they do what they do. And again, like I mentioned, for me, it was personal. It was a personal transition to make sure I stayed at home in order to take care of my family. And so again, when I think that work-life balance word almost triggered me because I was like, oh goodness, that's what I had to do. And for many of you that may know, I've been inside for a long, long time, and where my career has been built on community engagement and seeing and facilitating and engaging with all of you lovely people. But again, I made a choice because it was important for me, my family, and my health to figure out, how do I do this work and it's best for me? Because if it can be good for me, it'll be so much better for you all. Okay, so put self-care. Self-care. At the end of the day, we have to have self-care if we want to achieve those results we want to see, and where everyone thrives, right? We have to start within ourselves. Okay, thank you. The next question is, what one experience that you have encountered due to your disability that you believe has impacted you either positively or negatively? What one experience that you have encountered due to your disability that you believe has impacted you?
I can't narrow it to one. Oh my God, I'd be here all night. I,
Can you share one example or an example in a couple minutes?
well, I think that my disability, every day it impacts me, because I'm constantly having to plan for, okay, how am I going to get from point A to point B when I have 15 places to go every day? And, and I have a 15-year-old who is in 50 million activities, and I'm, balancing that with everything else. So I can't narrow it down to one, because every single minute of every day I am impacted by my disability, which, I'm not as impacted by my race on a daily basis. So I just don't know. I mean,
When you say you're not impacted by your race, is it because of your privilege as an attorney, or you just really don't feel like you're impacted by your race?
I'm definitely impacted by my race, but it does not interfere with my daily living on a daily basis. I
Thank
don't
you.
have to plan everything around my disability. Um, so that's what I mean.
Thank you.
Not because of my privilege as an attorney.
Okay. I like that privilege, though. Jessica?
I agree with Kimberly. I can't narrow it down to one defining moment. It's more of a confluence of things that kind of happen all the time. I will say I'm very fortunate to have been at Lighthouse of Pinellas for 12 years, and I love helping people at that job. However, before I was a full-time employee at Lighthouse, I was on a search for employment. And I cast a wide net to several fields: education, human relations, public service, community this, community that, lots of different people-oriented types of jobs. And I sent out a lot of resumes and I did a lot of interviews. And I know that it is competitive out there for everybody. And maybe I took it a little personally, but I just felt some things that I'm not sure that most people feel. Various people with disabilities disclose their disability at different times. Some prefer to disclose on the application. Some disclose in their resume, either directly or indirectly. Some wait until the interview to disclose. And my personal choice was to usually wait till the interview, because I wanted a chance to at least get my foot in that door and get my warm body in that room. Because I knew what was going to happen. If I disclosed ahead of time, they would come up with some bum excuse to cancel, and that's putting it politely. So when I got into those interviews, I do realize that maybe the interviewer was surprised, maybe they were shocked, maybe they felt like I had somehow tricked them. But my answer to the tricked item is, okay, so I have to trick you to be allowed to participate in mainstream society. Okay. So when I would walk into the room and they would realize something's a little different about me, the temperature would drop 15 or 20 degrees. I even had one person tell me directly, this is going to be a short interview. So with seeking employment, I know, I can just picture in my mind, there's a long line of 10 tall, blonde, white chicks with perfect makeup and heels and little black dresses. And who are they going to pick? They're going to pick one of them. So I'm very fortunate to have landed with an organization where I feel I truly belong. And I do feel that it is best to get all that discomfort out of the way at the beginning, because if you can't resolve it in an interview, why would a person want to work for that organization? But yet, there's also the added issue of wanting to explore, work with various populations, various community organizations, and I found it extremely competitive and extremely hard to get through to people.
Preach, Jessica. Sound like she has some more. See Jessica afterwards to hear more. Or we could just keep you up here, both. Okay, so we have a couple more questions before we are going to be wrapping things up. In light of our state's leadership, how do you resist the current discrimination we confront? such as book censorship, no high school Black history classes, cruel homophobic laws. Current state's leadership. How would you resist the current discrimination we confront?
That sounds like a perfect question for an attorney.
Right, right. Well, community law has a book club to better inform them, so they are doing their thing. I mean, they're leading with information, sounds like, not letting that hold you back. You don't have any book censorships within your book club, and it's voluntary, right?
No, in fact, we choose all the book, the banned books, really. I, you know, I'm kind of I kind of, just confront everything. I think that the best way to, what exactly was the question? To resist it is to confront it even more. I guess I would say, because I feel like the laws are wanting to try to create a chilling effect on a lot of individuals and on expression, freedom of expression, and just freedom of belonging, and learning. And I think that people's first response a lot of times is, well, I'm just not going to send my kid to a public university anymore in Florida. Um, and if you can certainly afford to do that, I say more power to you. But there are some folks who can't, maybe not be able to afford that because they may, have a bright futures, scholars relying on bright futures, or relying on the college funding for their child. And so I think I would just say, confront those changes openly, and encourage folks to gain as much knowledge from other sources. If you can't learn it in school, well, join an organization where you can learn it and feel comfortable. Um, join, seek out employers that welcome your differences and your expressions, because that's really one way to to resist that.
And to confront
Short
it,
of,
right?
yes, and to confront it, short of getting out and voting those suckers out of there.
And also giving money to small nonprofits who are trying to fill in the gaps left by our public schools now. Donating banned books, giving money to organizations. I had the privilege to volunteer for Girls Rock Camp, which did amazing work this summer.
Nice, thank you. I love what you said, Kimberly, about informing and learning. And as I was reading this question, I was thinking, and I wonder how many more years. It's going to be just a couple where, because half of the question is written in cursive. It is going to be cold, though, in a few years. I'm going to have to teach my boys cursive at home because it's not going to be taught in school. But we're going to be expecting them to sign their names and to fill out cards and to be able to read and understand and comprehend cursive. Or how much longer are we going to have cursive? Or are we just going to go to Read AI and let it dictate what's going to be said? But cursive is another thing, too, something as small as cursive being taken out of the classrooms. We have to be able to teach and inform ourselves, empower ourselves with knowledge, like Kimberly said, so we can confront those discriminatory actions. We have just two more quick questions I think we have time for. Since we knew the foundational root of inequities is the isms, and given the anti-woke climate in Florida, what can organizations do to dismantle the isms in the workplace, namely racism, as this can let's see here, this can contribute positive, or how can it contribute positively to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? So we know about the isms, right? And the anti-woke climate in Florida. What can organizations do to dismantle those isms? I think it sort of falls in line with that knowledge, right? Not letting it be afraid, but it's one step further when organizations sometimes rely on state funding. And when they're told, you know, there's no mandatory trainings on DEI. Jeff, how have your organizations been able to combat some of those?
Well, it's one of those things where, and I mentioned, 2023 was challenging because there were times where we didn't know what to do. And I think that's where you have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable because, you know, different entities gave us different direction. So we didn't know if we made one step, would we be violating, rule, ordinance, whatever. And, there was a brief moment in time where we did stop some trainings, and then we quickly, through, advice of counsel, resumed things on a strictly voluntary basis. So I think, it's critical that you have access to thought leaders who can advise you. But again, you can't let current political climates dictate decision making, especially in an industry like ours where to build a power plant, for example, it takes longer than a governor's term. So we can't make business decisions specifically on today's political climate. We have to look long term. But I also think that if you have individuals who have self-identified as one of the isms, to use that term, when you know that there is uncomfortable climate for that individual or group of individuals, talk to them about it. It's one of those things where, Michelle Cavallo works with me and is in the room. We had to have a very uncomfortable conversation with some of our employees that, felt like that the company wasn't standing behind them on certain ism issues. And again, you have to, in today's world, you have to be uncomfortable with the DEI topics because it is politically, you have to navigate it very sensitively. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have just one more question we're going to answer really, really quickly, okay? And it's for Kimberly. So we started with Kimberly, we're going to end with Kimberly. What can churches do to help? Do they need to raise money for bail, offer friendships, or for people to listen, be an advocate? What can churches do to help in 30 seconds? Because this is our last question. Sounds like whoever wrote it gave some great examples. So churches need to raise money for bail, make sure that they're listening, and be an advocate. Anything else, Kimberly?
I think churches can definitely welcome organizations and individuals that can speak on topics that might be important to their parishioners to know about on DEI and just on equity in general, because there's a whole bunch of topics out there, and I would love to talk to some churches about landlord-tenant rights and about transferring wealth in the African American community through probate probate actions and eliminating heirs property and helping people recognize when they are eligible for criminal records expunction, and all of that really I think goes a long way toward fostering equity in the community.
Thank you so much. It sounds as though we'll be putting a program together around that, inviting pastors right here to the Center for Health Equity to make that happen. We thank all of you. Thank you, panelists, so much for participating this evening, and thank you all for your wonderful questions. Turning it back over to Amanda.
All right, our photographer is itching to get a picture of the panel, so she's going to come up and take one before anyone goes anywhere. Yeah. And Kimberly, I actually am an attorney that does probate, and I work a lot on the south side, so I'll team up with you to get something going down here to help with the issues that you discussed. So programs like this are really important because diversity is something that points out the differences that everybody has, but it also reminds us that we're all having a human experience. So just because you have a different experience from someone does not mean that you cannot empathize with them and understand human emotions. So thank you to the panelists. I want to thank our venue here, the Center for Health Equity, our wonderful caterer and beverage providers, Simple Delights and Urban Drinkery, our panelists and moderator, our committee, and everyone that attended. This is an important topic, and it speaks to the heart of our mission, and what a wonderful place to have this conversation and the neighborhood that surrounds this and the history of this area. So I want to go ahead and provide some gifts to our speakers. All right, I hope we can all walk away from this discussion informed and better able to connect with those around us. Thank you guys for coming.